welcome to Sewing 101. I'm Debbie and I'm going to show you today what I suggest you have in your very own personal sewing kit. So let's look and see what I suggest. I suggest tailor's chalk. Of course you're going to need thread, and I like to stick with neutral, maybe white, beige, black. You got to have a pin cushion because you need to have your straight pins handy. A needle threader in case you can't thread those little tiny needles. It's kind of a nice thing to have. A sharp pair of fabric scissors, and I also like to have just a little pair hanging around my neck to snip threads as I sew. Then of course you're going to need your straight pins for your cute little pin cushion. A tape measure, and we're going to use this today. Hand sewing needles, they come in a variety of sizes. I just get the general purpose needles. A hem gauge, and you'll use this if you want to make pajamas and put a hem in the bottom of them, or we're going to use it today when we work on our project. And the handy dandy seam ripper. None of us are perfect. We are gonna make mistakes. And of course you're gonna need your sewing machine, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. Okay, over at the machine, I would suggest when you start sewing, if you've never used a sewing machine before, get a piece of paper, draw some straight lines on it. You don't need to have thread in it or anything, and just stitch along those straight lines and get you used to the speed of the machine and how the machine works. I'd also suggest drawing some lines that are straight and give you a pivot location, because you will need that when you're sewing. Learn how to pivot. You want to pivot with your needle in the down position, and we'll talk more about that later. You'll also need to learn how to stitch curves. So if you draw nice even curved lines on a piece of paper and stitch those, that'll get you used to how to pivot and turn on the sewing machine. Let's get started on our project. Okay, today's project is an envelope pillow. I've done this one, I've added 3 buttons on the front, but we're going to make it just plain and simple one today, no buttons added. What you're going to need is a pillow form. I happen to get this one at IKEA, but you can get them at any of the discount stores. First thing you're going to do is measure the height of your pillow. So I'm going to measure from the seam over to where I think the seam would be on the opposite side. And this measures 13 inches. So I'm going to remember 13 inches plus an inch because I need a seam allowance. Then I'm going to measure around the pillow. Don't pull it really tight, and this one measures 26, but this time I'm going to add 7 to it because we're going to have an overlap. So that's going to be 33 inches. I went ahead and cut my fabric 14 inches by 33 inches. On the 2 ends, you're going to use your little hem gauge, and you're going to measure in a 1/2 inch, press it, measure in another 1/2 inch, and press it. You're going to do that on both ends. This is going to conceal those raw edges so that you have a nice finished clean pillow like that. And then, believe it or not, we're ready to sew. When you're ready to sew, you're going to need thread for the top of the machine that matches your pillow, and you're going to need a bobbin, and the bobbin goes underneath. Follow your manufacturer's instructions on your personal machine, how to thread your machine and how to wind a bobbin. On every machine there's a presser foot and a lever that lifts the presser foot up and down. And what the presser foot does is it squishes the material together so that it'll stitch the top thread and the bottom thread. Each stitch makes a loop, and that's what ties them together. I'm going to raise my presser foot up. I'm going to bring my fabric in here. It's already pressed under a 1/2 inch, then another 1/2. Going to lower my presser foot, and I'm going to start to sew. You'll want to take a quick back stitch at the end so everything stays tight, and find your speed that you're comfortable with and stitch across the pillow. Okay, I've got the 2 hems done, and now we're going to fold our ends in. It's going to be right sides together because this seam will be on the inside of the pillow covering. I'm going to fold it in until I come up with a 14-inch square. We already know this is 14 inches, so we're going to get a 14-inch piece across the side. And right there's my 14 inches. I'm going to stick a couple of straight pins in here to help hold everything in place. Just a few like this. Come around to the other side. And if you're not used to sewing a 1/2-inch seam allowance, if this is your very first thing, feel free to get a clear ruler and use that tailor's chalk. Now you'll want to test this on an area of your fabric on the inside to make sure it comes out. Some of them don't come out when they're ironed. This blue one doesn't really come out. I'm going to mark a 1/2-inch seam allowance. I'm going to run a chalk line across here, flip it around. I'm going to draw another 1/2-inch seam allowance with my chalk, and that's going to be my stitching line. Okay. After you've drawn your stitching lines, then you'll come over to the sewing machine, drop your presser foot, and line the needle position up to the drawn line. You'll want to take a few back stitches to secure that edge. And then you're going to sew all the way across right on your drawn line. And go at the speed that you're comfortable with. When you come to the position where everything is doubled up with your hem, it might be that you might hear your machine make a little bit different noise because it's a little bit thicker. When you get to the end, do another back stitch, cut your threads, and we're ready to stitch the other side. It is that simple. Make pillows that match your couch, make pillows that match your bedroom. You can make holiday pillows, whatever you like. Now this one I'm coming up against the fold, so I'll want to make sure I go slow and make sure my seam, if I need to lift my presser foot to make sure that seam is underneath of there and not get it tucked, do that. Stitch along. And back stitch. Would you believe? That's it. Okay, we've got our side seam sewn. Now we're ready to turn it right sides out. Run your hands inside the pillow, get your little thumb right there in the point. Push it with your index finger, and there's your point, your corner. Do the same on the other side. Push it through. There's half a pillow. I'm so excited. Run your thumb through there, push it through. Do the other side. And there's your pillow covering. Your envelope pillow covering. Now we're going to insert our cushion inside of it, the pillow form. You can cut these off if you want to. Put half your pillow in, kind of wiggle it, make sure you get into the corners. Pull the other corner out, or the other half out. Push your corner up in there. Kind of fiddle with it a little bit. Overlap them. And there's a baseball pillow. I'll give you a quick overview on how I did the loops and the buttons on the denim one. I used 1/8 inch elastic and make a loop as big as you want to go around your button. If you have a great big huge button or just a tiny little pearl button. I made a loop in the elastic. Of course it's cut off there, and just top stitch it right there on your seam line. However many buttons you want. This one, maybe just one big button. One big red button might be kind of cute. And sew your button on, it looks like that. Thank you for joining me with Sewing 101. I look forward to more videos with you. Stay tuned.